Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Windows on the World. Tonight we're going to do another live stream, which will be on straight after this at windowsontheworld.net and also our YouTube channel while it's still there. That's in about half an hour from now. So if you're listening later or you find this podcast here at windowsontheworld.net or even on YouTube while we're still there, then there's a show after this where I have a special guest, Francis Lead, a great researcher and friend, and we are going to be talking all about the new pandemic era. Yes, pandemics are merely a driver of global governance, and we're going to be talking all about that. A follow-up really from a show we did a few weeks ago called Who Stole the World, and that's the World Health Organization, of course, and we talked about a document called A Safer Future. Everything has to be presented in the form of a benefit, and it doesn't matter whether it's a global governance level or at the level of persuading the public to get vaccinated. It's all for the common good, and you're very selfish, very irresponsible, and very full of hate if you don't join in. That's the communitarian system, and I did a show with Richard Willits of Glitch in the Code a few weeks ago, and I was very pleased with it actually because we covered communitarianism. Richard was very good on that at interviewing me, bringing out the most important aspects, and a very good chat we had. And also, check out last week's show and the week before. We've done a lot of interesting stuff lately, and actually, if you've got a few hours to spend, go back into the archive and look where this all started, because the sort of stuff that we've been talking about for the past 10 years, other people have started talking about now. Even mainstream journalists like Delingpole, he started going into global governance. Well, we were at it a long time ago. And if you go back into those shows, you'll find references to papers, documents, things like the Rio Conference of 92. And even before that, we talk about a lot of the things that actually sort of structured this whole new global governance system. Documents like Our Common Future in 1987. We talk about this stuff quite a lot on the show, so I won't go into it tonight. But yes, another aspect of the COVID era is that it's proving useful in sweeping away sort of needless associations. Isn't there a sense of urgency now to actually focus on the things that really matter rather than trivia? And there are still people out there who are focusing on trivia. And I've got rid of quite a few of those lately. Isn't it interesting also that the COVID era, the end times of which we are a part of now, is also very good at polarising things. In other words, you're either with us or you're with the dimwits. It's quite good for that, I find. But yeah, needless associations, the small thinkers, are now a major irritant. Have you had friends like that, where for years and years you've kind of tolerated them as long as you didn't have to see them that often? Now they're getting very obsessed about the virus and the vaccine virus, and they are now joining in with the masked masses and basically wanting to be good communitarians and not seeing what this is all about. Have you got rid of a few of those this week, or over the past few months, or even the last year? I have. I've shed loads of them, especially real idiots from the show business fraternity, the media whores, the people who are in need of attention. And that also brings up a very important point. The charlatans of the so-called alternative media. I don't think I'll even bother mentioning them, but, from the Galactic Federation to people who talk about the deep state being overthrown. And yes, one of them who actually thinks that he's got an inside angle with very secret people. Well, there's a few of those, isn't there? There's the CIA pet hamster. Have you seen him? There's a few of them. Yeah, and there's that driving instructor from the southwest who's been picking up loads of hits, and of course the new age charlatan and con man from Humanitad. Yeah, look that up. But these people have been around a very long time. What gets me about it is that people who you thought might know better actually don't. They fall for hopium, deception, and basically being abused and patronised by complete retards. That is very disappointing. However, it's something that we do not entertain on this show. Somebody I know from a long time ago who used to be semi-famous in the 60s, must be quite old then, yes he is, and should know better. Actually, in response to something that I put on Facebook, which I don't put many things on there, but I put something on there all about the global governance system, the stuff we talk about really, and it elicited this response. A fear-based response, obviously, but a response all the same. He said, "As I said, I'm afraid you are in the minority worldwide and the majority rules except in dictatorships. I would concentrate on singing, keep well." Well, I don't really do much singing anymore, unless I'm in the car on a journey somewhere. I sometimes spontaneously put on my old show and sing along to it and jump around the room, merely as a bit of exercise and to prove that I haven't got COVID. But, you know, I've had enough of these sort of people now. I've tolerated their patronising crap for too long, and you probably have too. So feel free to tell them all to F off, because we are in the end times. And if they say, "Who told you to do that?" well, tell them Windows did. But after a few facts, they sort of resort to this patronising attitude. You give them a few facts, and then they just don't take on board anything you've said. And that is a general thing in the UK, because people are constantly gaslighted by the media. People who listen to the BBC are basically abuse victims, and then they start abusing you with the abuse that they've received. But I was really talking about the global governance way, that everything is done through consensus, which actually went right over the head of this person. And you just think, well, how can they be 70 years old and have lived this long? But then again, we see queues of pensioners of 80 years upwards queuing up in the freezing cold to get injected with something they have no idea of what it actually is. And we're going to be talking about that tonight, actually. We're going to be talking about the whole new pandemic era. The pandemic era actually is not new. It's been going on for a long time. I'm not really talking about things like the plague, the Black Death, etc. I'm talking about, in the last 100 years, the idea of driving governance throughout the world and to gain control has always been seen through the eyes of social engineers who advocate pandemics as one of the best ways of controlling a population. Of course it is, because it's a silent war. You can't see it. If you're told there's a pandemic, well, there's a pandemic, isn't there? Well, according to the World Health Organization, 12% of the population have to be infected for a pandemic. It doesn't matter about that, because the goalposts can be changed whenever necessary. Do have a look at a document called A Safer Future in 2007. Who Stole the World? A show we did several weeks ago. I went into what it actually said. Yes, let's get back now to talking about the small-minded for a couple of minutes, because after this I'm going to do a show where we go into all of this information about the pandemic era. But basically we're talking about people here whose worldview is shaped by a belief in an image, a constructed facade. Anything that breaks it also breaks the worldview of the educationally blinkered. And you find this with academics all the time. This is why we have the two lies, right versus left, the misunderstanding of how anything actually works. The useful idiots of the perceived right versus the useful idiots of the perceived left. So it wouldn't really matter if you got some leftist idiot like Jeremy Corbyn and pitted it against a libertarian idiot or slightly right-leaning idiot like Peter Hitchens. Neither of them know how anything works, which is why they're there. But basically it's the same with all media. Anything bigger than this kind of idea gets completely left out. You go to your local politician and talk about Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, and they'll say, yes, that's sustainable development, but they don't know that it's a depopulation program. And if you say that, they will actually shout you down as a conspiracy theorist, because they're idiots, because they don't look at the bigger picture and are unable to join the dots, which is the whole point of how media actually puts things across, because you're given one narrative and it's very, very narrow. And it's the same with all media. Doesn't matter whether it's mainstream or so-called alternative. The gatekeepers are omnipresent. The facts are few and far between. Well, except, of course, on our channel and a few others. Even in the middle of a mass cull on the back of coercion into a scenario, which is what COVID-19 is all about. There's still these hopium addicts clinging to fantasy after fantasy. There's no difference between those queuing up for the jab and those believing that the deep state is coming down or there's going to be some kind of intervention. No, the cavalry aren't coming. It's actually up to you. That's what this is all about. It's about your response to what's going on around you. You cannot blame anything else. If you do that, you might as well join the consensus and be part of the big communitarian hive mind, which means that you have to be dictated to by global governance and the group structure, which is what they call a community, the global community. But there's no difference, between those queuing up for the jab and those believing the deep state is coming down, or there's going to be a galactic shift, or the Greys are going to liberate everyone from the underground bases, or whatever it is this week. These people mix everything up. So the New Age mixes up kind of deep state theories with alien intervention and New Age crap about positive thinking. Nothing wrong with positive thinking, but the way it's presented through the New Age is all about narcissistic self-examination and projection. The mixture of fantasy and reality is very, very dangerous, and people don't seem to want to hear facts, do they? If you give them a fact, it's not really dressed up enough. They want something with bells on it. They want something that might be secret, that somebody might have some inside information that they're giving you. Well, all the inside information is actually there. Nothing's really, really hidden. And if you do research, you will find the inside information starts coming to you, because you'll start to read between the lines, and then you'll be called a conspiracy theorist, because people with blinkers on cannot think big. Remember, the globalists think big, the public thinks small, because they've been taught to. The dribbling fantasies and the barefaced lies, though, of some of the hopium merchants are just as bad as the BBC, SAGE, the scientific and steering group, and the psychological behavioural unit, SO15, I think they call it, 7-7 Brigade. All of these people who are employed to control the narrative of public opinion are working in this very narrow confine. And once you start seeing outside it, you can actually do what they call, unconventional warfare with them. But yeah, the clickbait and subscription collectors, there's loads of those around at the moment, aren't there? A motley bunch of special needs fantasists, narcissists, and downright evil charlatans. But it's strange how people defend charlatans who lie and abuse their hospitality. It is a bit like being in an abusive relationship. They start to take any little tidbit that they're thrown, and they start forgiving the charlatans who lie to them constantly on YouTube or whatever platform they're on. BitChute, doesn't really matter. But these charlatans who constantly pile on this garbage that never comes true are defended by those who they are abusing, just like in any abusive relationship. We're going to be talking tonight about the emergence of the zoonotic disease threat. Yes, the transmission of so-called viruses and bacteria, germs, to humans. And this is a massive thing. The UN have been talking about it for years. We're going to be looking at it. I'm going to give you a bit of a primer, because we're going to be going live on our YouTube channel, but more importantly at windowsontheworld.net after this radio show. But we are part of a new pandemic era. Do take a look at that show, Who Stole the World, in our archive. And it describes a paper called A Safer Future, where they described how countries would be brought into line under global governance through, yes, the threat of a pandemic. Not a pandemic itself, but the threat of a pandemic. In other words, if you do something we do not like, who's we? Well, the global governance system, the WHO, the UN. We've now got the World Economic Forum, who've partnership with the UN. And these people are feeding public opinion through the media, through NGOs, and through all of the systems that have been put in place through sustainable development. Well, for instance, go and talk to anybody about climate change. They will believe it. They will not believe you that the climate change agenda was merely to steer a new form of governance and to get the human population to be ready to cull itself. That's all this is. It's quite simple. But if you put it in simplistic terms, the public don't like it. Doesn't sound very fluffy. Sustainable development, let's save the planet. That's what they want to hear. They don't want to hear that they're not saving the planet. It's got nothing to do with saving the planet, but it's actually to do with getting them off the planet. Then you've got all of these very entitled middle class people who support these sort of organisations like Sir David Attenborough presents for, which is like the population reduction organisations which masquerade as charities, the ultimate population and population matters. These sort of groups have been around a long time, and they all came out on the back of the environmental movement being mentored into the programme through useful idiots. But yes, that's a very good way of describing it. I think to start with, the pandemic scenario has been the most successful driver of technocracy. Nothing can touch the COVID-19 era to sweep away the established order and usher in the reset, the fourth industrial revolution, basically the mass culling of the population, along with the new biometric global health security system, tracked and monitored in real time in AI. I walked through the City of London the other day. Isn't it amazing? All of those glass towers are empty. Where are the people? Where are the people who work in those offices? They're at home. Offices are not necessary anymore. Within a year, the public have been trained to stay in, work from home, not go out. There will no more be any places to socialise. Central London's like a ghost town. I've never been able to take photographs like I took the other week, even at 4 a.m. in the morning, behind the Garrick Theatre, where there's usually a few people walking about. Absolute ghost town, all the centre of London, including Trafalgar Square, including Leicester Square. Once you get into the streets, it's absolutely amazing. It is like one of those dystopian nightmares. Wait a minute, it is a dystopian nightmare. But yes, we're going to talk a little bit about a safer future, just to prime you for the show. 2007, it was called the Global Public Health Security in the 21st Century. It was an overall goal of global public health security, which is what we're doing now. The whole of this idea that you're going to have this vaccination ID came from papers such as this. It says, for the purposes of this report, global public health security is defined as the activities required, both proactive and reactive, to minimise vulnerability to acute public health events, i.e. pandemics, that endanger the collective health of populations living across geographical regions and international boundaries. In other words, the borderless Pangaea, the wilderness of the mind, no more countries. However, the countries will remain separate as far as their borders go because they're going to restrict travel. That's what this is all about. The purpose, it says, of these new regulations is to prevent the spread of disease across international borders. That's the excuse. They are a vital legislative instrument of global public health security. Remember that, global public health security, providing the necessary global framework to prevent, detect, assess and, if necessary, provide a coordinated response to events that may constitute a public health emergency of international concern. How did SARS-2 start out? A bit like MERS, a bit like H5N1. Now, I'm going to give you a bit of background information of someone here. Mr. Peter Daszak is a president of EcoHealth Alliance. Now, he did amazing amounts of research into this crossover between coronaviruses and the zoonotic aspect, where it crosses over through animals into humans. And yes, he was president of EcoHealth Alliance, a research and outreach program on global health, conservation and international development. In other words, a big part of the Global Action Plan. Dr. Daszak's research has been instrumental in identifying and predicting the origins and impact of emerging diseases across the globe. This includes identifying the bat origin of SARS, the drivers of Nipah virus emergence, publishing the first global emerging disease hotspots map, discovering SADS coronavirus, designing a strategy to identify the number of unknown viruses in wildlife, launching the Global Virome Project, identifying the first case of a species extinction due to disease, and discovering the disease Chytridiomycosis, yes, Chytridiomycosis actually it's called, as the cause of global amphibian declining. Global amphibian declines, it says. The cause of, not very well worded that. Amphibians in decline through this disease. He is one of the founders of the field of conservation medicine and has been instrumental in the growth of eco-health, One Health, and now planetary health. So this fella is a big part of the global governance system. So this is the sort of person that the UN, the World Health Organization, have on board. In Wuhan, when this so-called virus was discovered, it was discovered by the Centers for Disease Control Special Investigation Unit. When you look at A Safer Future, the 2007 document from the World Health Organization, they clearly state that they are going to be looking for the beginnings of pandemics. And what do pandemics create? Pandemics create global governance, vaccination for all, global health security. Now, quite interestingly, it says this approach is informed by a perspective on emerging infectious disease research that sees problems of human and animal disease as intimately linked, exacerbated by ecological change. There's your driver. Climate change is also driving human to animal, animal to human zoonotic diseases. We are going to be taken off the land on the back of zoonotic diseases. That's also part of it. You'll hear politicians mentioning this. Boris Johnson's mentioned it. Of course, we're now looking at 30 to 40% of the UK being rewilded. Have a think about that. That means back to nature. That means you're not allowed on it. That means there's no farming. Okay, with this in mind, Dr. Daszak led the research that produced the first ever global emerging disease hotspots map. Yes, that's quite important because that's exactly the sort of information that the World Health Organization need to pinpoint and target their beginnings of a pandemic. Now, also, the papers that Dr. Daszak actually produced, and you can find this at projectreporter.nih.gov/project. And the project information you are looking for is Understanding the Risk of Bat Coronavirus Emergence by Peter Daszak. That's DASZAK for EcoHealth Alliance Inc. Now, from 2001, we had a paper called Understanding the Risk of Bat Coronavirus Emergence. In 2002, we had the same paper, the same title, different paper. In 2003, 4, 5 and 6. Guess what? In 2007, A Safer Future comes out. The way the World Health Organization is going to deal with these pandemics. This crossover of the zoonotic element, which is bat soup, into humans. COVID-19. Okay, now Dr. Fauci commissioned in 2004 gain-of-function virus research, which led into all this at the Wuhan Institute in direct contravention of the Obama administration ban. Okay, now that is another paper that you can look at, pubmed.ncbi.nlm.nih.gov 227-23413. So I might actually put some of these links in after the show. I'll put them onto our YouTube and also into the chat. Might even put it out as an article at windowsontheworld.net, because these are incredible links. They were sent to me by a good friend of the show. So thanks for that. And I hadn't had a chance to go through this, but it links in so much with what we're saying. It's quite incredible. Now listen to this one. Project number 1R01AL, I think it's AI111, no, AI1109640/01. project leader Peter Daszak, Understanding the Risk of Bat Coronavirus Emergence. Now, this is one of these papers I was talking about. This paper, I think, came out... When did it come out, this one? I think about 2012. But we're looking here at a description of what it's about. The project will examine the risk of future coronavirus emergence from wildlife using in-depth field investigations across the human-wildlife interface in China, molecular characterization of novel coronaviruses and host receptor binding domain genes, mathematical models of transmission and evolution, and in vitro and in vivo laboratory studies of host range. Zoonotic COVs are a significant threat to global health, as demonstrated with the emergence of pandemic severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus SARS-CoV-2 in China in 2002, and the recent and ongoing emergence of Middle East respiratory syndrome MERS-CoV. Bats appear to be the natural reservoir of these viruses, and hundreds of novel bat coronaviruses have been discovered in the last 2 decades. That's hundreds. Bats and other wildlife species are hunted, traded, butchered and consumed across Asia, creating a large-scale human-wildlife interface and high risk of future emergence of novel coronaviruses. A large number of SARS-related coronaviruses have been detected in horseshoe bats since 2005 in different areas of China. However, these bats, SARS-CoVs, show sequence differences from SARS coronavirus SARS-CoV in different genes. It goes on. Increasing evidence has been gathered to support the bat origin of SARS coronavirus in the past decade. However, none of the currently known SARS-CoVs, SARS/CoV, is thought to be the direct ancestor of SARS-CoV. Herein, we report the identification of a diverse group of bat SARS-CoVs in a single case in Yunnan in China. Highly pathogenic avian influenza, this is H5N1 virus, can cause morbidity and mortality in humans, but thus far has not acquired the ability to be transmitted by aerosol or respiratory droplets. Airborne transmission, in other words, between humans. That's very interesting, isn't it? So H5N1 could not be transmitted in the way that they're saying SARS-CoV-2 is transmitted through humans. This is why the World Health Organization was saying that masks were pointless and a waste of time. So now we know that masks are there for the compliance element, as we've been saying for quite a while. Of course, unless you have a surgical one, water droplets can get through. So it says here, this is the kicker. To address the concern that the virus could acquire this ability under natural conditions, we genetically modified a H5N1 virus by site-directed mutagenesis and subsequent serial passage in ferrets. The genetically modified H5N1 virus acquired mutations during passage in ferrets, ultimately becoming airborne transmissible in ferrets. Thus, avian H5N1 influenza viruses can acquire the capacity for airborne transmission between mammals without recombination in an intermediate host, and therefore constitute a risk for human pandemic influenza. And by November 2017, a paper showed that the gain-of-function research commissioned by Dr. Fauci produced lab-made viruses with the characteristics of the pandemic virus. I don't think we have to go any further with that, because we're going to get on to our next show, which is next in the list after this, if you're looking at us on YouTube. My guest is going to be Frances Leader. We're going to be talking more about this and her research. I hope you enjoyed that and found it useful as a tool to understand what has been going on over the past year and how we got to this point, because the zoonotic disease element and the pandemic element are key to global governance and the global health security system. So thanks a lot, everybody. I'll see you in the next show. Thanks to everyone in chat. I'll be having a look at that in a minute.
Reversal of the poles in